Do you know that moment when, out of the blue, you feel overwhelmed by panic and your heart starts beating out of your chest, your breath gets shallow, and it just feels all consuming? Yeah, I've been there too. The debilitating physical symptoms of a panic attack. But did you know that you can help regain control of a panic attack by stimulating your vagus nerve? Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicheter, and today I'm joined by licensed psychologist, sleep and panic expert, and the author of the upcoming book, When Panic Happens, Short-Circuiting Anxiety and Fear on the Spot Using Neuroscience and Polyvagal Theory, available in 2024, Dr. Chuck Schaeffer. Join us as Dr. Schaeffer breaks down panic and its causes, then shares what you can do to calm a panic attack. Thank you so much for joining me for today's conversation. I am super excited to talk with you and to learn from you all about panic. But before we begin, I really just want to check in with you. How are you really?
Well, I'm having my tea, my mint tea. That means I'm like tired or stressed, which I am a little because it's been a while, I think, since I've done one of these. And I think the other is just I taught in the morning at NYU, and that always takes a lot out of me because I really enjoy it. And that's why I really enjoy being here, because I think we're going to get to do more of that.
I'm so excited. I can tell how passionate you are about your work just from our first conversation. And I'm a psych student, so this stuff is always super exciting to me when I get to learn. But can you tell us a little bit more about your work with panic?
Sure. So for the last, say, couple years, I've been studying more the neuroscience of panic and how it works, because originally I was trained in the very traditional medical model where things are treated with medications and drugs and different things like that. And so there was a part of me that really was drawn to this because it had a new understanding of how to help people with really strong, racing thoughts, feeling like they're having a heart attack, intense symptoms that come with panic, that I've been dealing with and hadn't found a lot of good resources for it at that point. So I really got into it. And over time, I wrote some articles on Psychology Today, and then New Harbinger said, hey, why don't you write a book for us? And that's what I'm in the process of doing. So it's really been top of mind as of late with how I'm working with people. And it's a really interesting theory. It all starts with parts of your brain. I don't know, how much do you know about, how much have you learned so far about the brain stuff, the nitty gritty?
We have not learned much at all about the brain.
Really?
Why? Right, we should. We should totally be learning about the brain. It's psychology.
Okay.
But like you said, the approach goes straight to medication. And we tend to really look at the brain and what's going on and what other opportunities there are, which is why I'm so fascinated in neuropsychology. I mean, Dr. Amen's books are something that I read like there's no tomorrow. So I'm excited for your book, by the way. Congratulations.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm going to give you a little sneak peeks of some of the interventions at the end. We're going to go over. I'll give you a little taste of something you can do, so you don't have to rely on a medication or anything if you're going through an intense panic attack sensation. And I'll walk you through that, so we all can learn a new skill today. That's one of the best things I'm learning, is how flexible our brains are and how important knowing how our nervous systems work can be, because there's all these connections that happen in this one nerve. It's it starts right here. You can feel it actually if you go to the back of your head right now. You feel that bump right there where the base of your head, there's a little ridge. Maybe people have a different size one. You notice that? You feel a little tender region there. If you massage it, just feel the general direction it's going, left or right. Right? If you massage it a little bit, it might feel a little tingly when you're doing that. So that right there is one of the starting points of this giant nerve. It's called the vagus nerve. It's Latin for wanderer, and it connects all your organs. It starts up here, right? And so even just massaging it like that can be an intervention for some folks, but most people don't realize how much is really just physically connected into different ways that you can, if you understand your nervous system, you can basically hack different ways you're going to react evolutionarily to stop things like panic. So a lot of what's been huge for folks I've been working with is they didn't think they could stop a panic attack or tolerate one without Xanax or a tranquilizer. I don't know if you've heard of folks like that or if you encountered folks yet in your training.
I have, and that's so common, right? That we think that that's the only option, specifically Xanax.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've heard
Right?
about.
That's a big one.
And I know so many people in my life who are like, well, I
Mm-hmm.
just need to take a Xanax and I'll be fine. And
Right.
medication is what you need. I'm all for, absolutely. If that's what's
Uh-huh.
going to you. But to think that's the only option you've ever been
Right.
presented and to not know
Right.
other tools and like, God forbid you don't have it with you. What do you
Right.
do? And that's what makes me so frustrated is I'm such an advocate for medication when it's needed and when it's
Mm-hmm.
necessary, when it's going to help somebody. But it can't be the only tool we're giving people.
I agree. And if there's just been like if you look at the research right now and you look at what is currently on the market in the States for like pharmacological and non-pharmacological, can you guess which one's dominant by like 80%? It's pharma. It's all pharma stuff for panic and sleep. And the thing that's sad is a lot of the things that it targets is basically inducing things that people don't realize they have built into them if they understood how to use their body, right? We don't give that education. We don't give like the PT of your nervous system for anxiety the way we would for like if you had to rehab your leg, but it's essentially the same idea. Even that binary between mental health and physical health is breaking down the more we look at things like the relationship between for example, what happens when you get inflamed in that vagus nerve in your stomach and how linked that's been with things like biome to stuff like depression. There's a lot coming up about the big connections because that's the nerve, the same nerve. It's 80% of the signals that you get travel between that nerve and your parasympathetic system. So that's like most of your conscious and unconscious life is happening inside your body right there. And most people have no clue how where it is, how to access it, that it even exists. Right. And I think that's the issue I find with things like medication, because what really got me interested in this was finding all these folks that were getting overprescribed by like well-intentioned primary care folks. It's not like they aren't trying to help folks, but people become addicted to things like benzodiazepines, which is like Klonopin and Xanax, what we're talking about. And so I encountered people that were really dependent. And like one of the worst things I encountered is I was working on a sleep group with some panic pieces in the VA when like a really deeply disturbed veteran that didn't have access on hand to his like medication took from one of his friends basically something he thought was Xanax, the bottle of Evan Williams, and he died. He overdosed. And so this is the real tragedy: is there's a lot of people that have no clue how dangerous this stuff is if it's not prescribed right. And most of the prescribers, they're not in mental health, and you know what, I feel for them because they're doing their best. They just don't have the training. A lot of the primary care folks.
Absolutely. And on that note, my primary care doctor, I went in recently, maybe a couple, like a year ago, actually, and told him, like, I'm not sleeping. I have these chest pains. I am not feeling well. And he went straight to, okay, it's anxiety, it's stress, and then started describing different benzos. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try another one. That didn't work. Let's try another one. Oh, you know what? Let's add a muscle relaxer.
Right.
I mean, it's really great that he's able to prescribe tools, but they weren't working. And we were just trying to add more, trying and not looking at not even the recommendation of why don't you go see a psychiatrist? Why don't you go talk to a therapist? Are you talking to a therapist? That was never the question. It was, you are stressed, therefore you need medication. And not even looking at the difference between, is this just manageable stress? Is this something that's edging on anxiety or panic disorder? And what can you do?
You're right. So like it's really hard because there's such a gap in training, I think, and there's a gap in conversations. Like one of the best things I encountered when I was at the VA is they had a health psychology primary care rotation. So I got to talk and we would get to collaborate with the primary care folks and the ER doctors. And it's so much easier when you go back and forth. But how many of them do you think ever got formal training in things like counseling or like suicide assessment, like basic stuff?
Yeah.
And so it's just sad how broken off medicine has become in its training from like the other skills that would be really helpful as tools. It's just like I worked with these residents in my training at Mount Sinai, and they felt so helpless when it wasn't medication because that's what they were trained in. And I can really relate to how hard that is if you don't have other options. And at the same time, it really trickles down. And it's not like they intend for somebody to misuse a medication, but that's what happens when people get addicted. And these things are really effective. Like a Klonopin or a Xanax will absolutely in the short run knock out sensations, but it's not very lasting for a lot of folks. And most people, I don't know, if you've taken them before, what do you notice after an hour or two of being on a Xanax or a...
I feel like I could use another one, honestly.
Right? So it doesn't even have the effect that people are looking for with the relief, right? There's bigger stuff going on. And I guess what I'm starting to learn is there's really important things people can do physically with their body, preventatively and in general. That's very effective when I've been so stuck in like cognition in the CBT model for so long. And so it's really interesting, the stuff I'm finding. It also answers a lot of their questions. Like you said, what happens if people don't have access to their medication? So for example, how many women that are trying to get pregnant or are pregnant or breastfeeding, or how many folks that are chest feeding, same idea. How many of them do you think can be on a medication like Klonopin or Xanax if they struggle with panic or postpartum?
Yeah,
right?
It's not healthy.
You can try, but it's not advised, and there's not a lot of, what do you think the number one topic when you go to the Postpartum Support International is around medication? What do you think the number one topic is?
I'm not sure. What is it?
If you can prescribe things like tranquilizers to people that are breastfeeding or chest feeding, if you can do this kind of stuff, if it's at all possible. People really struggle with the concept of any other strategy, even when it's dangerous, because that's what they've learned. And I think the more we get conversations going like this, where we spread stuff out, like if you get a primary care person on to talk about the stuff they struggle with mental health, like in seeing folks, I think you're going to start hearing like the sad stuff that happens because we don't talk as much. But I think that could change, especially because when we talk about the brain, they're also trained in this. This isn't foreign to a doctor. It's day one stuff. They just don't understand the mental health implications, I don't think, because most people don't. It's newer.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations are so important, and why this research is so important, because if we're not talking about it, we're not going to move forward. And
no.
So again, medication can be so great, but it can't be the only tool, because it's not always accessible. Whether you're in a situation in life where you are pregnant and you can't take the medication, or it's not advised to take the medication, whether you afford it because insurance companies like to just stop paying.
Right.
Whether it's you forgot it and you're traveling and you don't have access to it, you can't get any more. Insurance is declining it or denying it, that you can't even
or your primary care realizes it's not good for you, but they don't have another plan, so they just stop prescribing it. And that's what happens when people start to see me for panic. Often when it's something like that for years, it's because they've been trying to control it, maybe even with a psychiatrist alone, but had no clue about like the things they could do physically to stop a panic attack, like the helplessness. I don't know if you've experienced. I've definitely. It's been a minute, knock on wood, since I had one. But it's really unpleasant when you're in the throes of a panic attack. It does feel like you can't breathe. And so that empathy I have for folks is strong why it's so easy to want to take a medication and just continue to do that, to take away that fear, that terror.
Absolutely. I remember one panic attack I had was so bad that I ended up in the hospital. I thought I was having a heart attack. I was in full tears and so much pain. Could not hold my breath. My blood pressure spiked so high. It was, my heart rate was so high. It looked like the symptoms looked like I was going to have a heart attack. And I had no idea what to do. I had no idea what was happening to me, because I had never really had a conversation on panic and the physical symptoms at all. So I didn't even know what panic was, let alone have any tools in my tool belt to be able to actually cope with it. So I didn't end up in the hospital scared out of my mind.
How many people do you think have that story for their first panic attack?
That breaks my heart to think.
And it's so sad. It's also so costly, like all those ER visits. Right? That add up. When if people had some education, some basic, like this is the stuff that I love, is what can you do when you teach people how things work, right? And they actually start to experiment with it. Like, for example, when you start to understand this, like nerve back here that you press on, it like runs all the way through right here. What organs right here?
Your heart?
What organs are right here? Your heart, and what else? Where are you breathing out of right here?
Your lungs.
So your heart and lungs are the first hit on this axis, so to speak, as it moves through your body. The next hit's your stomach, right? So when people tell me stuff like their heart feels like it's beating out of their chest, and they can't breathe, it's like really tight, like they're fighting for air. When they tell me they get nauseous, this kind of like waves of nausea that they don't understand, they're not really, they're dry heaving, or they don't understand why they feel so bloated and nauseous, while at the same time having that same numb, weird, like tingly feeling. And you feel all that coursing through and then around. It's that 80%. That's the vagus nerve triggering, hitting along the way, releasing from up here in your pituitary, releasing all this cortisol and all the adrenaline. Because your brain thinks evolutionary. Why do you think our brains? What's the point of this? Why do you think we get panic attacks? What's the whole point of this system? Why do we have this in our head? Any theory?
Isn't your brain trying to like protect you from danger?
Nailed it. Okay. See, so you did get so. Okay, so it seems to be going all right. Yeah, no, it's exactly that. So we evolutionarily, this guy, polyvagal theory. It's by this guy Stephen Porges. I heavily suggest folks check it out. It's a lot of what I'm talking about. So it starts like this. We have like the base of our skull, the base of our brain back here, which is where a lot of this, what I'm talking about, starts. That's us in like every life form that has a spine, right, on the planet. So evolutionarily, it's the oldest piece. And then the next up piece is what you're talking about, the fight or flight. Let's get the hell out of here, or let's mobilize. And that's like basically us and most mammals. And then you get to the very top, which is like, let's use language and empathy and talk to each other. And that's human. That's the only thing that we know of. That's like the unique extra part. It also is like where all that anxiety and stuff comes up with those crazy ideas, right? Of what's happening to your heart, for example, when you're starting to feel it beat out of your chest. Am I going to die? That kind of scary stuff. So what happens is when we get into this like survival mode, it hijacks all this and turns it off. And we basically go back to like the Stone Age, and we're looking at things as if it's going to kill me or not. Anything that comes into our purview. And so you're right. Absolutely. It's protective. That part of us is there because a lot of the time as we evolved, we did need to get out of situations where we could die. But like nowadays, people, when they are experiencing panic, it basically, you're looking at a kitten and you're registering it like a saber-toothed tiger. That's essentially what happens to people in panic. And you're right, when your heart's beating out of your chest and you feel like you're about to die, it makes a lot more sense if there's a tiger in front of you than like a new kitten. But if you have panic, if you have something around that, that's what it's going to feel like. And your body doesn't really know the difference. Your brain, do you think it's that aware of what's different internally and externally? Is it that smart, do you think?
I guess not.
We're not as smart as we think we are, but the good news in that is there's a lot more we can manipulate in that system. If we know that, right? Like if you know things like, so this stuff, this vagal nerve, as it presses down, it speeds up our heart rate and releases all this like adrenaline and stuff. That's what's really unpleasant. That's when you're in the hospital. What did you feel like was happening with your heart when you thought you were having a heart attack?
Like it felt like it was literally going to come out of my chest. It was beating so tight.
So there's a tightness, there's a speed, you can feel your pulse. And they said, what about your blood pressure because of that?
Oh, it spiked. It was so high. And I have naturally low blood pressure, so that was bad.
Yeah. So if you have naturally low and it spikes, how hard is your heart beating, thinking what's going on around you? What do you think your brain's telling your heart is happening?
I'm going to die.
Like, I need to get the hell out of here. I'm going to die. Something bad's about to happen to me. And if that happens, all the other human stuff kind of goes out the window. And so what's hard is that to this point, the best things people can come up with is like these sedatives and reactions from medications, right? Or these other short-term therapies that we had to use talk a lot. And how easy is it to use your words when you're in a panic attack? You notice?
I have no words ever.
Right? Because again, the part of your brain that does words up here is literally getting hijacked, cut off by like, oh my God, there's a saber-toothed tiger in the room. And so whenever that happens, we lose it. We go back to like being a mouse running from a cat, is what it can feel like. And so to get back to that full system, that full thing, you have to know ways to slow down your heart rate and stimulate, right? So the vagus nerve, if it speeds up your heart rate, what else does it do, you think?
It can slow it down?
Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It goes both ways. And so the thing that's crazy is I've learned to do behavioral stuff with people with things like, and we'll do it here with like ice exposure, cold exposure, that has come up in a lot of different therapies for distress tolerance, like DBT and ACT always talk about distress tolerance module, including things like like tips, which they talk about having an intense cold as a way to focus on something, and when you're in distress, when you're having distressing thoughts. And the reason that works is because it's tapping to that vagus nerve. So when we're in survival mode and we get exposed to extreme cold, what do you think happens to our hearts? To conserve energy, because they think that we're going to get to really cold, so we have to conserve. This is evolutionary, right? We're mammals, so we need to conserve energy. What is it going to do to our heart rate if we need to be able to survive in the snow? It's going to slow it down. And when our heart rate slows down, what's it going to do to our breathing and respiration? Because it doesn't need to keep pumping oxygen like that.
Slow it down.
So all of a sudden our breath gets slower and deeper, and our heart rate starts to drop. You might get tingles, right? Like this tingly feeling. I don't know if you ever got that after a panic attack at any points, where you got this wave of relief, almost of tingles that felt like it was going down your spine. That's your vagus nerve. That's literally what you're feeling. You're feeling it go down through your body. And what it's releasing then is things like dopamine to slow you down, to make you feel a lot less intense. That's what SSRIs are trying to simulate, but they don't actually do. What's wild is you can actually do it with some of the techniques here. It's like you can do way better than just blocking like the production of things like serotonin and dopamine. You actually generate more of it, right, organically. And so that's what you can do if you're able to abruptly slow down your heart rate by pressing on your vagal nerve. There's a thing called the vagal brake. That's what it's called. It's a different name for it too, but it's basically a system that slows down, sort of like a bike pedal. When you press on a bike on a bike brake, what happens to the speed of the wheel?
It slows down.
And when you release it, it goes faster. And so it's almost always in release when we're going through panic, right? This subsystem. And so when we have that, let me reference. I'm going to look to my notes because I don't always get into the science, but when I do, I want to be accurate. Yeah. So this flip chart's great, by the way, if folks want to see the little bike there.
Yeah.
And so when we are able to slow down and press on that vagal nerve, we press on that brake, and it does the same thing we do to a bike. It slows everything down. And so for a lot of folks, like, have you heard of any of this stuff before, like cold exposure, any of the stuff I'm talking about anywhere else?
I have not.
Okay. So you ever heard of the Huberman Lab podcast?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a really recent post, and he's reposting research. He does this all the time, findings. And so there's a lot of researchers and I assume because this is a big cultural tradition there too, that are studying the impacts of temperature fluctuation, especially cold exposure and hot exposure on the nervous system, on the central nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, which you now know parasympathetic is 80% vagus, right? You now know it's 80% this one nerve. It's wild when you understand that. And so they've been able to do experiments where they can track people over the course of months, like a experimental study, and see what happens when people take 30-second cold showers every day, or dip their head up to here in 40-degree bath for about a minute. Like, what happens? And what do you think happens to their anxiety and panic?
It reduces. It
reduces preventatively overall. They aren't even trying to do that, but it reduces it naturally by doing that. Yeah. And so the applications are really huge for what I've been talking about with your vagus nerve, right? With the vagal system. And so I've been doing it with a lot of people, and it's crazy. Like the other day, I had a new patient that was coming in and literally having a panic attack on the Zoom, which I don't know if you've encountered this yet, but it's really difficult via Zoom to help regulate. But I'm about to show you what I showed her if you have your ice cubes.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So she was having the same thing you were talking about. Her chest felt like heart was beating out of her chest. She thought she was going to die. She knew it was probably panic because it wasn't her first panic attack. And that's why she made the appointment with me. But it was happening as we were talking about the last panic attack. It started happening again in the middle. So I had her go to the freezer and grab an ice cube. Do you have an ice cube?
Oh, it's so cold. Yes.
It's so cold. Now I need you to do and this is what I told her to do. I'm going to have you do the same thing. I need you to squeeze it like you're making a diamond. It's going to melt. It's going to melt like really tight. Yeah. And it's going to feel really uncomfortable. And so maybe 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you to start thinking this. So right now, What are you thinking about? Can you tell me anything other than what's happening in your hand right now?
No, it's just so cold.
It's so cold. How uncomfortable is this? How squishy? How intense as you squeeze it?
It's just like it's melting.
Uh-huh.
It's so, I don't know how to explain other than it's just cold, squishy ice.
Yeah. And so if it feels like it's really hurting at any point, like really uncomfortable, I want you to let go and grab a new ice cube in your other hand. So you tell me when you're ready or when it starts to melt away.
All right, it's melting away. Grab a new
Okay,
one.
so grab a new ice cube or maybe two, whatever you need. Hard, squeeze it hard in your other hand. Now I want you to tell me, can you try now to think about something other than your hand? Can you think about anything other than how cold your hand is right now? How uncomfortable it feels, right? It's really difficult. So when she was doing this, and you might notice this as we're doing this, her breath got a little deeper and she slowed down a little bit and she's started to blink more, and she actually did this swallowing thing involuntarily and yawned a little bit. And you might switch the other hand now. Yeah, you got to keep it going. And so she did this with me for about a minute, going back and forth like we're doing right now between your hands. And what's crazy is you think your vagal system, your vagus nerve, can tell that your hand isn't like in ice or dying right now. Do you think it knows anything like that?
No.
It's not smart, right? It doesn't think that. It thinks you're gonna. So what do you think it's doing to your heart rate right now? Because it thinks you're under the water and ice.
It's calming it down. It's
Slowing it down because that's what it automatically does outside of your awareness, right? Because it has to when it passes through this station right here in your heart.
I actually do feel a lot calmer too.
You feel calmer. So you can release this. So what feels different? You can let go of the ice cube now. What feels different now?
I feel like I'm one of those people when I record a podcast that I'm like very, very like excited. So my heart rate's a lot faster. And I just feel calm.
Yeah.
I feel genuinely calm and not like my hyper, I mean, I still am hyper, my hyper. I can just breathe.
Yeah, so breathing, right? You can feel calmer. Maybe it slows down a little. You might feel a little tingly looseness, like you're about to fall asleep. So the other thing that goes through that region is like going to sleep every night. That's the other thing I do. I help people with. So there's a lot of places where people got medications to do what we just did in like a minute. How long does it take for a Klonopin to digest, do you think?
30 minutes?
At least 30 minutes. That's like if you're an Olympic runner, right? That's a really fast metabolism. For most of us, like 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Which means you're going to be in how much panic for how long before you even start to feel something go through your blood-brain barrier, right?
And that was like a minute.
That was like a minute because we didn't go through the blood-brain barrier. We went through that beautiful highway we now know about called the vagus nerve. We went right through it because you know where else it links to? All of our sensations, like our hands.
That is so cool. Why is this not something that's taught to us?
I know, right? It's that, well, there's other, I think it's not called this because they don't have neuropsych the same way, but I think a lot of Eastern medicine, when they talk about pressure points, they're effectively talking about the same things that we now know exist in like polyvagal theory and in general nervous system. Just the whole idea that 80% of your nervous system is like of your parasympathetic, all the things you're not conscious of, digestion, your heart rate, breathing, all those things that feel off when you have panic, right, are like wired into all of your senses so directly. And that you can, if you know how to hack that system, like we just did with ice, or if you do with cold shower. Another thing that the other day, somebody else was worried she was having a panic attack and she texted me because we didn't have a session. And I told her to jump in a shower immediately, jump in a shower and stay in there for a minute or two, as cold as you can tolerate. And she literally fell asleep right after that because she was so tired, because she was in a panic attack for like an hour and a half of just pain. She was exhausted. But like it automatically turns off that switch, that brake gets engaged, and then we don't have cortisol or any of that stuff pumping through us. It's making our heart beat like it's the 4th of July fireworks finale.
Wow. So how long after a panic attack, like symptoms are presenting, can you use this technique and that it will work?
I would say it's a great preventative technique when you feel even a little bit of panic or anxiety. Like I also say, like if you're feeling anxious thoughts that are hard to shake, it's really hard to think about anything when you're squeezing the ice cube other than the ice cube. And so it's the same idea, which is it'll short out anything that's happening even below stuff like thinking and logic and talking, verbal communication, like what you were talking about. And so if you're already losing that, if you've noticed you really don't have words for what you're feeling, this is a great intervention to help you get your words back to at least start to describe and feel anchored. That's what I do in therapy. That's what I often use it for.
That is incredible. I'm so blown away the fact that I've spent so much time being prescribed so much medication that does not work, addictive medication, to a young 20-year-old and did not work when something so simple like ice.
Like ice. Cheap.
Had a better effect. Cheap, not addictive.
Yeah.
Works quicker.
Yeah, it does work a lot quicker. I mean, I'm not saying it's like long. Listen, there's a lot of folks where it's too intense. But honestly, at this point, I've seen enough people that have struggled where it's effective, and I've seen the brain science that I think it's a better first line treatment for a lot of folks, as opposed to if they have like ongoing panic and they really can't stop, in which case maybe something biochemical like, you know, a medication could work. But I'd love to see more research. I love when I see more of the research coming out. Right now, I think it's so new, but I wonder if it'll start, you know, behavioral medicine, which is what that is, right? We'll start replacing like pharmacological more. That's my hope.
That's my hope too, because again, I've said this so many times. I'm such an advocate for medication when it's needed and when it's helpful, but not the only tool, not as the only tool we're giving people, because this is a great tool you can get if you're at a restaurant.
Yeah, I know. And also you're right, like cost effectiveness. You don't have to go to there's, again, I would say if you're having panic attacks, of course, you want to go to a psychiatrist, you want to go to a licensed therapist, you want to make sure you know what's going on. And that's when most people come to me. That's what's happening. We're talking to a licensed psychologist. So you want to make sure you're doing that for sure. But at the same time, you want to be open and maybe ask about things that you can do now that you're aware of it, that are more like the ice, the behavioral interventions, or a cold shower, that can really turn off panic sensations immediately. Sorry, don't know what that was. So there's some things like this that seem to be really effective for panic. And I'm excited to see what happens as more people apply it. And psychology is really starting to take off.
I am too. I love seeing all the new research coming out. I'm taking actual therapy right now and looking at, I'm enjoying it-ish. I had a quiz last night. I'm not going to lie. I didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't love the quiz.
Delta D thing. That was on the quiz. No idea what that was. I was like, what is this symbol? Clearly my own fault. But
I do not miss that. I don't miss that part. I don't miss that part. I like teaching it far better than learning it.
I mean, I like learning it. I don't like the quiz parts when I didn't read that. I'm not.
Well, yeah, I've been there too. Hey, I will swear that I read most of it, but some of it was glanced over and not fully read, and I still got a PhD. It can work out, everybody, as long as you try your hardest. You know.
All you gotta do. But I love behavior therapy because when we're coming up with treatment plans, we're looking at like action steps people can take, tangible things they can do. We're not straight at medication, which I was more in like my it was a psychotherapy class. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me. But when the first class I took, when we had to come up with treatment plans, a lot of times it was refer for medication, refer for medication. Right. And that was one of the first like short-term goals. And that really frustrated me. And I was like, but why aren't we trying other stuff too? Or first, we're going straight to medication for anxiety or for symptoms that present as anxiety or depression, when we could be looking at specific action steps they can take, which is why I love behavior therapy, because you're actually doing something. Yeah.
Well, and that's the sad part, is a lot of people forgot the B part of CBT, right? It's behavioral therapy as much as it's cognitions, right? We got way too fixated, especially if you're trained like I was a little more traditionally on like what people's fantasies or projections are, what people's automatic thoughts are. right? Or what their schemas are. And that really distorts your ability to understand what I'm talking about, which is like, I don't really need you to think anything to be able to press on your vagal brake. I just need you to know how to do it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, this is why this is so important, because there's so many things that we can do. Do you have any other tips that someone can use to access that vagus nerve?
Sure. So there's cold exposure, so things like cold shower. So a good preventative one, that at least if you look at the research, is 5 days out of the week doing a shower 50 degrees or less for about 30 seconds.
Wow, that's cool.
So if you do that, then, and stick to like a healthy diet, healthy exercise, the other basic tenets, good sleep. I'd say that's the other foundation that's great for your nervous system, is good sleep. If there's another big tip, that would be it. If you do that, you see huge results for mood and calm, like that sensation you're feeling right now. Because what do you think happens to the ease of turning on that brake, right? The more you practice this, what do you think happens to your ability to do it if you do it more and more and more?
It just becomes easier and more natural.
Yeah, because you wire a literal new path, a new behavioral path. Like every time you learn a new behavior, right, you get a groove, so to speak, oversimplified, right? But the more you practice something, what happens to that groove? Right? For podcasts, how much you have to think about how to navigate this right now.
Yeah, no, I don't have to think. It just
right? And yet think about the first one you did.
That was a lot.
Right? Like how much you had to check and go back into things and maybe stop at different points. And that's because how much have you practiced this behaviorally?
Now a million times, but back
right?
then, time. Oh.
And so what's going to happen if you keep doing this, whether it's a cold shower 5 times a week or whether it's just anytime you notice your heart rate's going up trying to squeeze an ice cube? What do you think is going to happen to your ability to turn that brake on?
It's just going to become natural. It's going to be a habit that I can do.
Faster.
Yeah.
Right? Much faster because you'll have a path built already. So all this, like right now, people get how, like when you're going to the hospital, how hopeless and scared were you feeling? Right?
Terrible. I was like 16. It was.
I know, that's terrifying.
It was terrifying.
A 16-year-old, right? And now think about this. What if we could teach 4-year-olds how to do this when they get scared? What I just told you. What if this was something somebody could understand by the time they were 10? Then anytime they started getting freaked out or panicky, because a lot more of that's going to happen in adolescence, right? Yeah. That they could learn how to use their body to slow things down and to feel calm. What would happen, I wonder, to people's sense of self, right? Everybody, if they learn that stuff.
It could really change like the trajectory of so many people's lives by giving them that tool to be able to think.
How many people would never get addicted to things if they learned to do that at like 6, right? Instead of learning to go to a drug of choice or take a medication, right? Because we give little kids a lot of medications. Because again, that's the model we know. It's not necessarily because people are doing it for any other reason. I think it's almost always well-meaning. That's what I've encountered with all the prescribers I've met.
Yeah.
Just that they don't have the knowledge base, and it's really hard to believe because it's so different than what they were taught, right? Like it's really hard to buy until you start doing it. That's why I wanted you to do the exercise, right? How connected your nervous system is, your parasympathetic, to all of this feelings, to panic and anxiety.
It really was amazing to actually get to do it. Because to be honest, if you had just told me about it, I would have been like, oh yeah, no, that's so cool. And I never would have thought twice about it. But actually doing it, when I become a therapist, this is something I will have a cooler of ice.
I have ice cubes in my fridge at the office. I got them. I have them in the fridge at the office. Worst thing is you have iced tea one day, okay? So you don't use them.
But that if I didn't do it, I never would have.
Yeah. So I guess the other ones I would say that are tricks, I guess, little hacks like that. So if you can sit in an upright position, or you can lay on a floor and do this. I'll do it with you right now. And you can press again back here. And yeah, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. And I want you to just notice which direction it feels like you're getting more pushback when you rub left to right. And I want you to go in the direction with the least resistance. So for me, I'm going left today. Not every day, but wherever it's the most loose already. not with where it's tense. And now I want you to just hold right there, let your hand on that for a minute. And now you can open your eyes. And I want you to try to, without moving your head at all, I want you to move your eyes as far to the right as you can. All the way, like you're doing a vision test, all the way to the right. And you might notice a yawn or a swallow. I want you to do it as hard as you can to the left or right while you're pressing back here. Your swallowing is what I'm starting to see happen automatically. When you notice a swallow, move your eyes to the other side. Same thing, without moving your head. Your head's moving a little bit. Just try to keep, that's why I have the hand back here to the right. I often do this laying down myself. So it might be easier if you're laying down to keep your head on a pillow in one direction, but as far up to the right or left as possible. And there's the yawn. So you can let go. So what do you think's happening when you yawn or swallow? Any theories why that's happening involuntarily?
Is it just like my body relaxing in a way?
It's getting the signal that your brake is getting engaged when that happens.
Wow.
Right? And so that means you now know your heart rate's slowing down whenever the brake's engaged. And your breath is probably going to be easier and lighter or deeper, rather, easier to breathe. That's the first automatic things you might notice. The other things you might notice is any tension in your stomach might start to lift a bit, or other like nauseous feelings. But this kind of stuff, the automatic swallow, the automatic yawn, those are now you know why people yawn. The mystery might be solved for you. Those are calming signals. They mean our body's calming down. It means that brake's engaged.
That is...
So now you know if somebody's yawning around you, they're not bored. What are they actually probably feeling around you?
Calm.
That's a pretty cool feeling to know. That's it. I love that feedback. That'll really change your therapy work too with people. Because once you start to notice that stuff, somebody's swallowing or yawning, you know what's probably happening now. How are they feeling?
They're feeling calm. They're not bored.
Which means how much easier is it going to be for them to talk about their stuff? Because their language is back on. So now's a good moment to maybe dig in a bit.
I love that. Next time I ask you, like, are you bored? I'm like, no, I'm calm.
Yeah, I'm very calm around you. That's a compliment, right? I feel very safe.
I love that. You are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. So that's another one that's called so the eye thing back and forth like that. Do you know any other therapies that do that?
Is that
you learned about any of those yet? So EMDR. Have you heard of EMDR?
EMR.
Yeah.
Okay.
EMDR does the same thing, right? It's all rapid eye movement stuff to hit at your parasympathetic nervous system. And so there's a lot of stuff that I draw together from different schools that basically come together as a neuropsychological thing, where you don't have to do the whole thing, but you get some of the great effects. And like I'm saying, as a therapist, like what a game changer to know if somebody's really quiet and having a hard time, and after a good cry, you see them yawning, or you see them starting to, swallow a bit in the middle of the session. It means they probably are becoming back online for you to be able to talk to them and find out more what's going on.
That is... why am I not learning this in school?
I didn't learn it either. I've been out of school for years to learn this stuff. I think there's a big gap between the latest research, because the same things I'm interested in psychedelic assisted therapies if you're going to do any medication intervention, and there's so much good research, but it's not well distributed yet. It's not well understood. And so it's just like the same thing with this. I think there's so much out there, but it's not being integrated enough. And I do think a part of that is because it would really it would make you have to really change the medical model for mental health, right?
Yeah.
It would have to be more of this behavioral medicine stuff like I'm doing and less of the prescribing medications.
Yeah, that is so true. That's why these conversations are so important. And like you doing this research, making this known, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming on today.
No problem. It was lovely. And I'll have more of these tips in my book that's coming out next year.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.